All right. Well, good evening to the Aussies and the Kiwis, and good morning to you guys. Thank you so much, Mira and Jayson Calton, for joining us today. It's lovely to see you in person, and I've followed you guys for such a long time and listened to so many great things that you've put out there. Um, so maybe if we could get you guys to give us a little bit about your background each, where you've come from and your education side, and then we can start to talk about some things you guys have done.
Sure. Well, I guess I'll start with how we met and why we're even in this realm that we're in right now. I was not that girl. I was probably the person that you talked to and who just said, I'm just living my life and I'm sure I'm healthy. Like so many people out there are completely unaware. I mean, I'm sure anyone listening to this has probably woken up a little bit and they're on their journey, but I was not that person. I was living in Manhattan. I was a publicist and I was in my late 20s and I was working out a lot. I had my own company, so I was very stressed out, really working a lot of hours. And I just started to not feel so great. My back started aching, my body, my bones started aching. And I just kept saying, I'm just too tired. Maybe I'm just doing too much, too many late nights, putting excuses, as many excuses as I could on top of each other to try to, forgive away the pain that I was feeling. And so many people do that. They wait until it's too late to do something. And that's what I was doing, is ignoring it. And then about my 30th birthday, I realized that I wasn't even doing my job anymore. I had actually hired people to go to events for me as a publicist because I
Wow.
just didn't feel well enough to go. And when I realized that my life, I had actually given away my life to other people to do because I was so unhealthy, I could no longer do it. That's when I decided I had to go to the doctor. And yeah, I was diagnosed at that point with advanced osteoporosis. So the doctor told me that I had the bones of an 80-year-old and I was just 30.
Wow.
They,
Wow.
yeah, they told me they had no idea why it had happened. They had not seen anyone this young before, that it was completely unheard of, and that I had one choice and one choice only, which was to get on medications and to go and live with family members so that they could take care of
So
me. Not,
Mary, you're 30 years old. You're in New York. You're living the high lifestyle.
yeah.
I'm just thinking.
I'm doing film
Um,
premieres. I mean, like literally, like it couldn't have been any more exciting at that young of an age. To think you're on top of the world, and then to trade it away for sitting on your sofa with a computer on your chest because you literally can't sit up to do your work anymore.
wow. So what got you? That's what go to that stage, but then that's the high life you're living. But what were you doing that got you unhealthy? I mean, food, exercise. Were you just living the high life there, or were you actually trying to do exercise and so on?
Well, I was a cardio queen, which we go into a lot now. There's so many people and so many women especially that just thrive on cardio and think that the thinner they are, the healthier they are. And that was me. I was doing 2 or 3 hip hop classes a day.
Wow.
Um, and then I was walking from uptown Manhattan all the way to downtown to see my clients. I just thought the more movement, the better. I was following a low-fat diet, which basically consisted of waking up to black coffee in the morning, as many glasses as I need, cups as I needed just to get me going, followed by the same foods every day, which was a spinach salad with grilled white meat chicken and a fat-free dressing, a low-fat muffin, which I'm sure was just loaded with sugar. And I would do the same thing every single day because in that lifestyle, and a lot of people in New York order out more than they cook in, that was what was easiest for me. So at the time, I thought I was doing everything right.
Yeah.
I was a size 2. I looked like the vision of health. To anyone who saw me, including the guy I was actually dating at the time, had no idea that I had gotten sick. Because you're so ashamed
Yeah.
that you really try to cover it up.
Especially
When I got
in the glamour industry that you're in too. It's all about that appearance, but you got
yeah,
the outward appearance, but inside, wow, even if the doctor just must have shocked you.
well, he was, I mean, to see his face, and he was equally as surprised as I was. And I think, you know, he's not used to walking in the room and saying, I don't know what happened. You know, I don't know why you got this, and I don't know. And it was, you know, see specialist after specialist after specialist in New York City, which I did for a short period of time until they all came back with, you have advanced osteoporosis. It's probably genetic, honey. And take some calcium and go and live with your family because you're not going to walk. And I was like, this is not happening. You know, at first you accept it because you have to accept it, but there is a point where all of a sudden you just are ready to fight back, which I did. I moved to Florida. I had to sell my company, and I moved to Florida, and my sister took care of me, and I started doing research. And, you know, being on the bed for a long time, you have a lot of time to do research.
Yeah.
And all I kept finding out is, well, oh, the calcium, strong bones. That's why they told me that. But then I started looking and saying, but what about these other things? There's magnesium and vitamin K and boron and all these different things that no one had told me about. And that's what led me to actually look for somebody who could help me with this, because I was getting no answers from the medical community except for take this Fosmax. And I looked at the side effects and I was like, there's no way in hell I'm taking this. First of all, like, I didn't know if I wanted children, and you can't get pregnant if you're taking it. And I was like, I'm not even married yet. Like, how do I know what life has for me?
It's crazy.
Yeah, there were so many things. So I started to look for a doctor who could help me. And luckily, along my path, I was introduced to Jayson, who was working with people who had all different conditions. But luckily, he was willing to take on this really annoying New Yorker who just showed up in his office.
So,
right,
what were you doing at the time, Jayson?
Yeah, so that's where I kind of came in. So at the time, I was really doing more pioneering work in low carbohydrate ketogenic dieting. That's what I had been doing. I had a kind of a specialized ketogenic diet that I called orthomolecular nutrition back in those days. And I was kind of working with Dr. Atkins to kind of tighten up what the Atkins diet had been doing up until that point. And I had been working with a lot of people with heart disease and diabetes, and AIDS was big back then. And we were trying to improve their immune system through that ketogenic program. And so a lot of the doctors at the hospitals knew that I was kind of thinking outside the box with some of these different, traditional diseases. And when they found this woman, this 30-year-old woman with advanced osteoporosis, they thought, well, maybe what you're doing could help her too. And so that's kind of what I thought.
Was forceful.
Yeah, and Mira was like, we've got to do this. We've got to reverse this. And I'm thinking to myself, well, I had actually just read an article, maybe just a few months beforehand, about something that was relatively new in supplemental science, which was the idea that certain minerals were competing with each other when given in the same formulation. This antagonism, or what we call micronutrient competition, was kind of new back then, but they knew like certain minerals competed with each other when you took them at the same time. So there was some of these nutritional theorists really that were saying, well, maybe we shouldn't be taking them like in a multi-mineral, multivitamin capsule. Maybe we should be, taking them at different times during the day and taking them away from their known competitors or antagonists. And I thought, well, that's kind of a really cool idea. And I know osteoporosis is a mineral deficiency disease, or at least we thought it was, and we still think it is. So let's try it. What do I have to lose? So that's kind of how we started. We got together. She said, I'll do all the research, because I was quite busy. I was running a full practice at the time. And so we sat down and we just said, okay, let's start with the minerals. And we started splitting them up, and we started her taking,
the vitamins.
Well, eventually that's what our new research realized, that it wasn't just minerals that were antagonists or competitive. It was the vitamins too. And so it started to really dawn on us, like, wait a minute, if this is really true, if they're really antagonists, then taking a regular multi isn't really going to help you. First of all, we need to map out all the micronutrients that are competitive, which nobody had really done. This was a lot of research where we had to go through and find people who, like, obscurely in the back of the study said, oh, and by the way, we realized that vitamin A and vitamin D were competing, or we realized that zinc and copper were, or
we
calcium.
Only got good results when we separated these.
Right.
Yeah.
Or for some reason.
Very random studies at first.
It took quite a while to create that. And then we had to start creating a regimen for her. So we said, okay, let's take 2 or 3 pills before breakfast, 2 or 3 after, 2 before lunch. Pretty soon she was taking about 35 pills a day.
I had like a kitchen counter set up with just singular nutrients. And either I had to grind them up so they'd be better absorbed. And all day long, it was just this constant swallowing of nutrients, just trying to separate them. And it got really horrible. Because that's like, what is it, 30 pills like a day or something?
It was like 30, 35 pills. It was over 10,000 a year. But she was willing to do it. I mean, she was like, we're doing this. And I was like, okay, if it's going to work, it's going to be pretty amazing, because I had never seen nobody else doing this kind of research, specifically with osteoporosis. And then we combine that, of course, with a ketogenic diet, because I felt like that ketogenic diet would put her body in a healing state. It also has a lot of benefits to it. We can go into some of those benefits, but just off the top of my head, you know, it's low anti-nutrient. It had the ability to get some of these essential fats that I wanted her to get into. You know, it tends to be, you know, more protein-based and meat-based, so we got a full spectrum of amino acids. So there's a lot of benefits to it. So we combine those two things, and basically after about 1.5 years, 2 years, we looked at each other, and we kept asking, and she kept giving me feedback how she was feeling, how she was doing. We had
started movement again. Obviously, I was walking again and feeling healthier by the time we went to get tested.
Yeah. And 2 years later, we went in, and actually, honestly, I was really hoping for any improvement in the bone mineral density, of course, with the DEXA scan is how they do that. And I just thought, well, if we could just see a little bit, because, you know, bone takes a while to rebuild itself. And certainly we weren't anticipating going from, you know, advanced osteoporosis to no osteoporosis. I thought we'd hit maybe that osteopenia state or something, which is kind of a mid state. But the doctor came back in and literally said, you don't have any osteoporosis.
Actually, it was this very lovely, and I say that very facetiously, this lovely nurse who came in. She herself was not very healthy. She was quite a larger woman. And she came in, and after telling me the amazing news that we were jumping up in joy, saying that I didn't have osteoporosis, she wrote me a script and said, but darling, if you think that you're going to stay this way, you got another thing coming, so you better start taking the Fosmax. Yeah,
she said, this will come back in a year or so. This is going to come back, no problem. Nobody gets over osteoporosis. It's kind of like, that was the medical, and still is the medical kind of concept on osteoporosis. You may be able to improve, but it's going to come back. Well, you know, because it's genetic is what they think.
Right, and now we know, yes, it will come back if you get back in those habits. I mean, I got off any medications I was taking. What we realize now is that it wasn't just the micronutrient intake that healed my body. It was also getting rid of the micronutrient depletion from other things that I was doing in my life.
Right.
So it's not as easy as just taking a supplement and that's going to cure everything that you have. But we started doing our research on this. Why was I getting this? What had I done? And are there other people around the world that are also experiencing the same problems because of similar lifestyle habits?
Yeah.
And so after curing me, that's really kind of when we decided, you know what, this is now of massive interest to us. Oh, we got married also. We fell in love.
Just so I can get the big picture, because you're talking to a fireman here who knows a few things. So I get the big picture here. We've pretty much done Sex in the City over here in New York.
Yeah.
Got a little unhealthy. Diagnosed as the bone density of an 80-year-old woman by DEXA scan. You've gone out and done your own research. You've used all those smarts to find everything out. You met the guy, and now we've had Sex in the City, marry the doctor. Is that how it goes?
Yeah. We cool.
Sounds pretty good so far, right? Yeah.
Wow. What an amazing.
And I got a lot out of that. Plus, I mean, I got a great woman out of it as well. But no, we really found a passion, not only in each other, but really this passion to be able to help people and really say, this was something completely new. I mean, I had been in the supplement business. I had owned supplement stores. I owned health spas. I owned gyms. I was in that world fully. I mean, I used to be training partners with Dorian Yates, who's, Mr. Olympia. So, I mean, I was really into that bodybuilding, ketogenic world. And this allowed me to kind of focus on the micronutrients and into the medical world. What could we do if we took the best of what we knew about diet and started to focus on those micronutrients rather than the macronutrients all the time? The carbs, fats, proteins, those are really important, but there's a whole nother world to that equation. There's those micronutrients. And if we start to understand how to deliver those micronutrients, now imagine what you can do.
Yeah.
And we were able to prove that you can take a disease like osteoporosis, something that people think you don't get over without really harmful medications, and completely turn that around in 2 years. Plus, you feel great, you're healthier,
Yeah.
you're living this great lifestyle that you feel really good about living, not doing something that you're like, oh, I hope this doesn't hurt me. Now, you know it's not hurting you. And so we said, well, if this is really true, we wanted to go around the world. And, I was really inspired by Weston A. Price, who had traveled around the world, quite a few years before, and looked at remote tribes and really studied studied those remote tribes, and came back with the conclusion that they were a lot healthier than we believe they were. And I wanted to look at that too, because if micronutrients were really going to be at the root of what all these diseases are that we're all suffering from, I wanted to go learn from a lot of the elders from these tribes before they passed away, before we lost that information. And I thought, well, this is a perfect time to do it. And Mira was up for it.
Yeah,
so.
and I'm always up for planning a trip and trying to figure, get some research done. One thing we realized is that it wasn't enough just to look at those people in that situation, because we couldn't really monitor what was happening with them over a longer period of time, just in the brief amount of time we'd be able to visit. So we set it up so that we were going to see the remote tribes, spend some time with them, see what health looked like, what their habits were, what their diet was. And then we were going to go to semi-remote, which was kind of like people from the remote tribes, but who have just now started to get Westernization into their cultures. They've just had a taste of it.
Right.
And to see what's happening immediately upon Westernization. And then to go into urban worlds that we all live in today, and to then look at it and look at the lifestyle and diet and supplementation habits and say, why are these people the sickest? With every opportunity to be healthy, with everything put, we got the hospitals, we got all these things that should be making us healthy, that we think should be making us healthy. And yet these are the sickest people in the world.
Right.
So that's really what we did for 7 years.
Yeah, we call it the Calton Project, and it ended up being 7 years. And like Mira said, I think the interesting part was watching how that progression happened. So when we went to the remote tribes, we worked a lot with like Doctors Without Borders, these people who had been in these areas for a while, and they had observed and they had actually looked at and evaluated the health of these individuals. And just like Weston A. Price found, we didn't find individuals in any of the remote tribes there was no cancer, there was no diabetes, there was no osteoporosis.
They had amazing teeth, amazing bones. I mean, we'd wake up because we'd get up at like 6 o'clock in the morning and go look at the sunrise. And there was like 100-year-old guy out there just working in the yard. And we were field, whatever, in his yard, working in the field. And we were just like, it's just amazing to see how healthy their lifestyles were. And I mean, you wouldn't find that here. You're never going to find a person who with that physicality that is that age.
Yeah, I mean, they would walk on average about 9 miles. And when we're talking about remote areas, we're talking about deep into the Amazon jungle. We're talking about in Papua New Guinea and the Trobriand Islands. We went to the most remote places on the planet. And we would set up with, interpreters. So obviously they didn't speak our language. Obviously, we had to bring all these people with us to go. And we would spend on average maybe about a week to a couple weeks with these individuals. So it wasn't just, we didn't just go in and try to upset, the apple cart, so to speak. We really tried to integrate in slowly.
These are places you do not go without a guide.
Right.
I mean, in like Papua New Guinea, they're still headhunters. You go with guide. You learn very quickly that they are not, they want to touch everything. They have not seen people that look like you. So it was really fascinating. Jayson would do a lot of the guy stuff because in those cultures, there's still a very big split between the men and the women.
Yeah.
And so it was very interesting to see if I went with the women and, what we were responsible for and just to see the cultural differences. And one of the things that we like to say is everyone in the cultures had a purpose. And I just loved that feeling, that sense of belonging, that how they're contributing. And I think that that's something that a lot of people miss from an emotional standpoint in the culture today where we live, that sense of well-being that just comes from being part of a tribe, being part of a community.
I was just going to say tribe, Mira. I was just about to post that today, and it is part of the sunlight, the food, the sleep, the lack of stress. But one of those things is a sense of belonging and a sense of tribe. And, you know, I was in the army for a long time in the special forces, and yeah, I know exactly what you mean by those cultures. They're just, they're just real.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's amazing. I mean, how kind, everyone's just like, weren't you scared? I'm like, no. I mean,
We're a lot more scared in a big city than we'd ever be in the remote tribe.
I mean, you saw a lot of weird things. We ate a lot of weird things. We saw a lot of weird cultural experiences, all sorts of things that we would think are insane to do as part of what they do. But for example, you know, if we go into the bush, or if we go into a field someplace, or, you know, say you're going to the Amazon and you don't know what you're looking at, you know, anything you touch can basically kill you. And it's just the way it is. Like, we're not used to these plants and these animals and all these different things. But they do something really cool, which is like every baby that's born is immediately, they make a bath, the first bath, out of the first wash, which is filled with all of these plants that would normally be poisonous.
Really?
And they wash the baby in it. And it's very much like our vaccinations, except our vaccinations have gone off a ways and it's putting all sorts of heavy metals and stuff into them. But what they do is they wash the baby in it, so the baby will no longer react when they come into contact to it in the forest.
Yeah, they'd rather the child die right there and then if it isn't able to build up an immune system to it. So the entire concept of these remote tribes are, you know, a lot of these women are having 10, 11, 12 kids. You know, we talk with them and be like, well, you know,
how
many children? Oh, these are my 7 kids. I had 12 kids, but those
7.
got eaten by an alligator, or, you know, we lost that one. It's really, life is looked at very differently. And I don't mean lesser, it's just different. Yeah. Yes, they
died of these things, not of disease.
But not disease. And so much of their time is really gathering the food and really honoring the food. The food is really such an important part. Whether or not we were in like the Sepik River areas where you see them eating a lot of fish and a lot of protein, or if we're in the mountainous regions where maybe they're eating a lot more sweet potatoes or a lot more carb-based diets. You know, we lived with remote tribes, and we purposely tried to live with remote tribes with diverse dietary philosophies, because we wanted to look at how the micronutrients and also just how diet affects health in general. Really,
these people are toxin free. There are no endocrine disruptors. They have no blue light. There's all these things that we surround ourselves with these days, and we think of them as conveniences. All of these things don't exist for them. So they have higher micronutrient values in every bite that they eat, because they pick it fresh, they rotate the crops, they know how to make this earth that we live on into the most, you know, sustainable, lovely thing that it can be. I mean, they
and it's only like 10 or 20 people eating in a 1 mile radius. It's not 10,000 people on a mile, you know, square miles, which is, so the earth is full and so vibrant and really rich in these micronutrients.
And the
whereas the foods
really
we're eating now, you know, are basically dead. So, you know, we have these issues. And then what we did is we moved to the semi-remote areas. Now, the goal of this was to actually try to find people who in their early adult life or in their childhood had moved away from remote tribes to the semi-remote areas. So they were actually raised there, or maybe lived part of their life in the remote area. And we wanted to interview them and see how their health had changed just within the few years that they had moved to these semi-remote areas. Now,
you didn't have to look hard.
Yeah, semi-remote areas kind of pop up between the big cities. Remember, you can't just go to a big city from a remote area. You don't usually speak, maybe you might not speak the language, you don't have any money, you don't have any media, and no education, there's no way to have a job. So a lot of these semi-remote areas are kind of halfway marks into the urban areas. And you could tell a major difference in their health, just in their physicality. You start to see the not obesity so much, but weight gain would start to form. The musculature of the bodies would start to change. Their entire lifestyle changed, moving to these urban areas. When they move out of that natural remote state where they were walking every day, eating the right food, being part of the groups, now they're sitting on couches, driving cars. They usually have like a moped or some kind of a motorized vehicle.
Their canoes that they used to literally have to like row forever to get to where they're going. Now there's a motor on the back, so there's no actual physical, force being used and everything. So, and then all of a sudden the government starts subsidizing them. They say, we really want to bring you in the fold. We love you, and we're going to make you one of us. And then they start sending them junk food.
Yeah.
And we worked with a couple different tribes looking through the list of what they were being optioned. And it was unbelievable to us. And we sat with the elders of one community. We said, don't accept these things because you're going to end up sicker. And the food list, and they also you see a lot of candy, a lot of like Kool-Aid for breakfast, and a lot of these different foods. And it's amazing to see now the youngest generation's already starting to get a little heavy and get sick.
Yeah, the thing is, everything comes in these brightly colored packages. So the box, bags, and bottles, those are the first things introduced to them. They're immediately drawn into these brightly colored packaging, which we all know is great marketing by these food companies. And then the other really horrible thing is that they, at this point, have no connection between the foods they're eating and the diseases that they may get. First of all, they don't even know these diseases exist. And then that connection has never been made, ever. So when they're enjoying these drinks out of the bottle and the chips out of the bag, they don't have the first clue that these things could be bad for you. And that's where we started to see, again, working with these doctors and these nurses that had been there for a while, they start to see these traditional forms of disease forming. And then by the time we got to the urban areas, and these are still third world urban areas, we're not talking about, England or something. We're talking about cities in these
India.
small countries or large countries. Some of these cities are huge, but by the time they get to these areas, the diseases are rampant. And everybody, whether you've traveled to these places or just watched the news, everybody's heard of the explosion of diabetes and heart disease and osteoporosis in places like China and India and these developing countries as their diet becomes more westernized, as they move away from their traditional diets, as they start to have to deal with stress and the endocrine disruptors and the heavy metals and all these toxins. And as they start to live in this toxic soup that we're all part of, and their diets have changed, disease is just right around the corner. And so this became for us then kind of the foundation of our nutritional philosophy to try to help people. And we knew we had to attack it very strategically, almost like a military kind of exercise where we're going to look at disease as this entity and we want to attack it from multiple angles. We want to not only get those micronutrients in, but we want to block a lot of these depleters from entering in so that we could create this nutritional state where you could thrive in no matter what environment you lived in.
So you've really opened up a whole bunch of tangents, and I want to wrap this episode up so we can come back and talk again about a couple other subjects you brought up. Food being one of them, Jayson, maybe talking about different diets. But let's just bust a few myths. For a start, I can only think of Darwin, think of Western Price, and you guys that have done what you've done, visited so many diverse populations and seen evolution in time, really. Myth busting. What about tooth decay in the indigenous tribes? Was there any tooth decay there?
Well, there was in some areas, like in Tibet, I think about.
That's semi-remote.
That's semi-remote.
I mean, they already had dentist stations,
yeah.
So that's obviously semi-remote. But in the remote ones, not at all.
Yeah.
I mean, people had. I could share pictures. We took so many photos.
Yeah.
The bodies. I mean, I was just so impressed with their bodies, their bones, and their teeth.
There were some 60 and 70-year-old guys that could literally get on stage. I mean, these guys were ripped and fit, and I mean, in awe. I mean, I'm like, what do you guys do? They do a lot of hopping, tribal dancing, walking, but obviously no traditional form of exercise. But there are some of these guys in their 50s, 60s, and 70s that are looking incredible. And like Mira said, we even met quite a few guys, people in their 90s and into their hundreds. So, I mean, the idea, that people can't be healthy into their older age, that's ridiculous. And we didn't see even tooth decay. I mean, they had some of the most beautiful. Now, granted, if you go to some place like, Papua New Guinea where they chew betel nut, their teeth don't look like our traditional white strip teeth, right? They've got red gunk all over them, but they're healthy gums. And when you speak to the medical people in those areas, they'll tell you, no, tooth decay, and that's something they do not have.
So they're living indigenously. They're essentially the cavemen just going forward in time, but they've got all those health effects. I mean, because you guys are talking a little bit of utopia that we just can't do right here and now in our modern world. But I'd love to delve in future talks about how we can reverse that. So you guys saw just health in the way they are naturally living, and then the worst case was in the city, and you actually saw, you got to see in between and how they got there. Now,
Yeah.
I know that you guys
about that.
I'm
We
sorry.
got to talk to some of them about when they started to see it, and that was actually fascinating because some of the cultures actually realized, they haven't really put it together until someone like us comes in and says, okay, so when did you see your belly grow?
Yeah.
And they'll say, oh, it was about the same time as the Coca-Cola. And you're like,
yeah, they put it together, but they still don't know big belly means anything different. They don't.
It means rich man because you can afford lots of Coca-Cola. So they're looking at these things as new toys. In fact, in Papua New Guinea, they actually started, the way that they got them hooked on soda was actually to look at what did these people love more than anything, and they were hunters. So what they did is they actually created dartboards all around this town square, and they would give them darts, and if they could hit the bullseye, they would get free sodas.
Which they did all the time. I mean, these guys were excellent marksmen.
So
Not only would they give them one soda, they give them 8 soda, and then those 8 sodas were given to their friends. So the big tribe, you see the influence, right? The big tribesman, the one who's the big
hunter,
he's handing out the Cokes to you, which of course is great because that's like your God handing out, or your like, hero for sports hero handing out these Cokes. And so the whole, I mean, literally the center of town is nothing but dartboards. And that's how and here they are, like, they're just covered in leaves. Like, it's a little leaf skirt or a little something on, and they're just sitting around drinking their sodas and their white rolls. Yeah. And you're just like, and these companies are well aware what they're doing. Yeah. They're trying to hook them.
Marketing genius, but they're going to lose their customer base when they can't be healthy enough to even drink anymore.
Skyrocketed. The cancer rate skyrocketed in that area once the Coca-Cola company actually moved in, as did the white bread company, because whereas they would ate betel nuts traditionally for eons, forever, chewed them. What happened was the sugar that they had never had before was now giving them all mouth cancer. So they blamed it on betel nut and said there's an explosion of cancer here from betel nut. These people have had betel nut forever. And it wasn't until the introduction of sugar. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was really, really eye-opening, and it was really great to be able to see that. Yeah, we can talk more about, we can delve in deep as to how you can start to live a more traditional lifestyle. Certainly we have some, things in our books, and we can talk to you about that as well. But it was good to see. It was sad to see, but at the same time, it gave us something that we could talk about and tips that we could give to people as to how they could live closer to that lifestyle, even in our modern world.
Yeah, so we basically took that information and said, okay, what did we figure out in general, which was that it comes down to 3 things. It comes down to eating rich food, micronutrient-rich foods. So that's one thing that they were doing naturally that we have to work really hard to do in this modern culture. And the next thing we had to do is check your lifestyle. Check your lifestyle, because there's so many things in your lifestyle that are depleting you of micronutrients. And try to remove as many as you can. We can't get rid of all of them, but we can try to minimize it. And just the way that they had it, as many as you can. And the third thing is to supplement, to put them back in, because none of us are reaching what these people have innately. So those are the 3 steps that we kind of took away from the Calton Project. And we sort of incorporate them with all of our clients now and all of our books. And that's sort of our belief system.
Wow. Look, I'm so excited because I would love to pick your brains further about nutrition, about the different diets and what you saw, and incorporating exactly what you said there, Mira. So we'll wrap this one up, get you guys back in for another talk further. So I just want to say thank you so much for sharing both your personal stories, and congratulations on meeting through such adversity. I admire you. I admired you guys both from the moment I heard you, and it's just been a pleasure to be able to see your passion and to have you guys tell us some of your story. I'm definitely going to enjoy the next part of this. So tune in, people. We're going to get Mira and Jayson back on. We're going to go delving into things a lot deeper about the food, what they saw in their journey, and what these micronutrients are that they keep talking about. We're going to get them to explain that as well.
Thank you
Perfect.
very much.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you.